So ideally, from my perspective, is bringing in the partner and spouse is very important early on. To have that person aware of what's going on, even though terrifying, and oftentimes there's a lot of reactivity with that, trying to keep that a secret and be in recovery perpetuates the very same thing that brought the addict in the first place, of having secrecy, of keeping things from those that they love and care about. Even when that includes telling stories about having an affair or multiple affairs, still getting that information out, although painful for many, the spouses will say, wow, this explains everything. Mm-hmm. Certainly there's pain in the reaction, there's anger in the reaction, but all too often the addict doesn't understand how much love and compassion there also is in their spouse and partner. They've not learned to trust that, they've not really known that in their lives, not experienced that very much. And so that reaching out and telling the very person that probably cares and loves them the most the truth about them can be an additional piece of their healing, even though that's a bumpy part right. of the healing. It's an absolutely necessary one, and that's one of the things that we work really hard when people come in, is to convince them, to encourage them to share with that person that they're in a very close relationship with, if indeed they have that relationship.
So this disease is also an intimacy disease, or affects intimacy a great deal.
Absolutely. So many times spouses go, I knew there was something missing. Mm-hmm. I knew that I wasn't being told something. I've had this inkling that there was just something that was taking him away or taking her away, was distracting. And I've looked and not been able to find. I've asked and not been told. I never get an answer that's sufficient or felt right to me. And so now having this, at least I can put my history in perspective and get my life started again. And we'll see where this relationship goes from there. Working on intimacy with a couple is a critical dynamic, and it really begins from my perspective with having the addict fully disclose their sexual history. Certainly disclosing if there was any kind of behavior acting out with somebody that your partner or spouse would know is vital to be fair and reasonable to them. Again, another way for a spouse to put together that history, knowing what was going on and when it was going on, and then what types of behavior, so the categories of behavior, and keeping it at that level. Often a spouse or partner wants to know all the details. What did you do? How did you do it? And that ends up being typically a very destructive piece of the recovery, because it creates from my perspective, a brain lock for the spouse. So you just get locked in on those images, and then it becomes so much longer and so much difficult to clear that out of your mind and be able to re-enter into an intimate relationship.
So it's important for the spouse to get some help as well and some guidance.
Yeah, and typically it's not real difficult to convince them, but every once in a while the spouse partner will say, no, this is not about me. Right. I'm healthy, I've got things put together. He or she needs to get their act together. Leave me out of it right now. I want to see what they're going to do. And that's a pretty common response. When we can get spouses or partners involved, it strengthens the recovery process, because they begin to look at how the addictions impacted them, the way it shut them down emotionally, the distrust that developed over time, the kind of watching that they've done or managing that they've done of the other person, the way they've tried to keep children from knowing. So there's so much that goes on in a family system where there's been addiction, that to bring both parents in or both partners in, you begin to become a lot more clear about what those things are that have been hidden in secret, and really kind of even under their awareness. You bring those things into their awareness, so that then the whole system begins to change. And even in that regard, letting younger children know, age appropriate, mm-hmm. developmentally appropriate, that mom or dad has done some things to break a promise or a commitment to mom or dad. And then older children, we've got a really strong belief that when kids reach adolescence, that 13, 14, 15, 16, and that age range, to be told more is important, because it becomes part of their sexual education. Can't imagine a more powerful sex education than, mom or dad's been doing such and such, that brings it home real quick to a young person. What's exciting to see is how well young people respond to the truth, because they tend to be great truth tellers themselves, unless they've lived in a family where they need to keep things a secret. But even if that's the case, having a parent tell the truth, to go completely a different direction than they have before, then becomes compelling to that young person as well. And so behavioral problems that may be going on for young people can oftentimes be addressed just through the emotional healing that comes by telling the truth in a family system.